Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. In today's episode on the podcast, I sit down with Ann Millington, a leader whose career spans psychology, public service, and the frontline challenges of the fire and rescue service. This isn't really a conversation about leadership theory that lives on a PowerPoint slides. It's really about real people, complex systems, and how we build organizations where we can all, including our leaders, actually thrive. Ann and I dig into the idea of psychological safety. This is a topic we've covered a lot of time on the podcast, creating spaces where people can speak up without fear of blame or judgment. But this time, we actually bring some really good information. And I've got to put a lot of the credit at the hands of that to Ann. Because if the culture isn't safe, people won't share ideas. They won't raise concerns. They won't admit mistakes. When that happens in the fire service, lives are at risk. Talk about building a no-blame culture, because it isn't about letting standards slip. It's about learning faster, failing smarter, and creating trust. Talk about the fire service as a complex human system. It's not just trucks, ladders, and pumps. Yes, that's a lot of it, but it's people navigating structure, navigating hierarchies, and the pressures that don't always fit neatly together. Leaders in this environment need more than technical skills. They need emotional intelligence, the ability to read the room, and the resilience to stand steady when the ground shifts. One of the most powerful metaphors that Ann really spoke about for me, and I'll probably misquote her, but it's that great leaders are like gardeners. They don't just command, they cultivate. They identify their team's strengths or super strengths, as Ann speaks about. Those hidden talents and unique capabilities that, when nurtured, make the whole team stronger. Sometimes that means giving people the right tools. Sometimes it means pruning back what holds them down. And sometimes it's just about giving space for their growth. We also explore things like inclusion and well-being, but not as like a HR tick box, but as a connective tissue with strong organizations. When people feel valued, when their individuality is celebrated, when recognition is shared openly, teams don't just perform, they absolutely transform. Ann shares insights into navigating procurement, budget cuts, and organizational politics while still championing innovation and sustainability. We talk about the importance of mentorship and coaching and how they actually differ, but why both are essential. And also why feedback, the thing we all struggle with, though uncomfortable, is often the key to unlocking confidence and growth. This is a conversation about the fire service, yes, but it's also a conversation about leadership in any complex, high-stakes world. So whether you're a watch manager, a chief fire officer, or another crucial role in our UK Fire and Rescue Service, especially if you're stepping into leadership for the first time, Ann's perspective will challenge you to see leadership less as control and more as cultivation. So settle in for a podcast that I love this conversation. I really enjoyed it. It's thoughtful, it's inspiring, and it's a practical discussion with Ann as we explore psychological safety, no-blame cultures, and the complexity of human systems to help our leaders in the fire service all the way into the future. I'll see you on the other side. So, with a background in psychology, coming into something like the emergency services where people are sleep deprived, we're overworked, and some would say the pay is challenging. Sometimes we wrestle to attract top talent to the sector. What made you want to come and do it?
Well, I'll be dead honest. I got headhunted to begin with.
Okay.
And it started off like one of those blind dates where I kind of arrived in the service, not entirely sure what it was all going to be about, and then fell in love. So it's as simple as that in reality. So I can't say I started with a massive, I've got to go into fire and rescue. Mm-hmm. But having arrived, you kind of started slowly, and then gradually I just absolutely love it. I love what we're about, what we're doing. So yeah, it was a blind date that went really well, and we're still married.
So, you know what, that's not an uncommon story. A lot of people get pulled in to assist on something, assist on a project, assist with some academics, assist on some proceedings of some form, procurement perhaps, and then they kind of like the vibes. Because we said before we started recording today, like one of my biggest things is I love the people that are attracted to the sector.
Yeah.
and they can come in from all different kinds of avenues. So when you first came in, what were you asked to? What was the sort of briefing? Think about this blind date. What would have been on the profile? What did you think you were coming to versus the
Yeah.
reality?
Yeah, I was looking for a kind
Were you
man who was,
catfished?
well, yeah, all of that. I mean, when I arrived at the big agenda, and this is a long time ago, 2007,
Yeah, you
was
came in then, didn't you?
just before
Crikey.
austerity. So I think people arrived thinking I was all about, coming as some kind of vicious change agent. It actually wasn't. The big agenda was about inclusion, and I'd done a lot of work around that in different places. And when I arrived, it was evidently we were pretty traditional and look, that's kind of doing some fairly clunky work around inclusion. So that was
Yeah.
the big brief to begin with. And it was a fair bit of modernising how we were approaching different HR systems and how we were really making sure it was much more people focused. So that was the kind of opening brief. And then literally a year later, we got hit with massive changes and cuts. So some of that agenda got broadened out, to say the least.
Someone said, achieve the world and then stripped away the funding. Sort of, not to that extent.
Yeah,
but
exactly. End up doing what you... I mean, if we've tried to kind of make sure that we carry on doing all those good things, whilst we had to do some really difficult stuff as well. But I've certainly always tried to keep pushing that agenda, because I don't think nowadays you can divorce well-being from inclusion anyway. If you're really going to take well-being seriously and that kind of psych background, you want people to feel that they enjoy where they work, and that's a really broad canvas of how you do that, and it takes ages to do it. And to be fair, to use an old expression nowadays, we're still on that journey.
Yeah, that journey one, that's kind of like the pay stall, isn't it? We're always on a journey, and it is always evolving. I always think of, in fact, I'm not going to flood you with my own biases. If we had to put these as lead measures and lag measures, where would you put inclusion in the well-being, psychological safety? Because they all interconnect. Teamwork, diversity, equality, all of these. It's the buzzword bingo. It's like, I think I remember, who was start with Y? Oh, what was his name? Brain
Simon
fart.
Sinek.
Simon Sinek. Thank you so much. When he says about like companies trying to be more authentic, and they do surveys and they're saying to their customers, like, tell us how you will like us more and how we can be more authentic. And it's like, no, just be yourself. And if we like the authentic you, then we will do more of it. Don't ask me.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, it's like asking some people, like, do more inclusion. And you just say, what does that even mean? For a lot of people, it is this buzzword bingo that gets bandied around. So I do my typical thing there of asking 4 questions in one, and people aren't sure what I'm trying to ask them. But if we start with that lag measure and lead measure, because people talk about inclusion, and I'm like, I feel like inclusion obviously matters, but it's not a lead. I think it's a lag. I think if you focus on everyone's health and well-being, they will feel a greater sense of inclusion. Now, again, that there's so many rabbit holes perhaps we can dive into from that.
I wholly
but if
agree,
I had to force you into a corner, where would you put these things?
I mean, it's definitely a kind of messy soup with different bits in there. But I think one of the things that's tempting to do, and organizations have done this, is sort of focus on the protected characteristics. So they'll talk about things like, more female firefighters, LGBTQ, and all of those are really important. But I remember a conversation when I was in the station once, and we were talking about, and these are kind of group of white men. I was the only woman in the room, and we started talking about, I think, one of the classic discriminations in this country, where in effect I said to them, would you all rate yourself as intelligent? And this is a group of firefighters. And they said, and remember this first comment back, somebody said, well, I haven't got a degree, so I'm not sure I'd be seen as intelligent. And I said, here we go, classical discrimination, and the UK is bad for it. In reality, there are about 11, 12 different types of intelligence, and I'll make a pretty good get that firefighters are really high on decision-making, problem-solving, spatial awareness, muscle memory, a really strong sense of emotional intelligence, especially with the kind of great ones. And those are 5 of the kind of different types of intelligences. But because people are in a particular profession, they don't then think of themselves as being intelligent. So I think when I come to that feeling of well-being, one of the things I really believe in, and this is partly a conversation with my two brothers over the years, because they're in the same, they're both in manual trades. And there's that whole thing about, well, you went to university and we didn't, that must make you more intelligent. You think, not really. Yeah, let's not play that game with each other. I love you both, and let's not do that to each other. You're both really bright people that made different choices. But I end up thinking that if people are really putting that kind of downer on themselves for whatever reason, and they're not seeing themselves in the very best way, eventually it's going to erode your well-being. And I've worked with so many people over the years where you're talking about, and I've run some confidence workshops and things like that, where you're trying to say, because people unpeel themselves, don't they? You kind of, you're born with 100%
We're very
self-esteem.
self-deprecating. I don't know if that's a Westernism or a UKism or what. We're very self-deprecating.
I don't know. It's sad, whatever it is. And by the time you get to 18, all the research says you've got about half of your self-esteem left, because all those things that impact you, bullying in schools, work doesn't help. Sometimes you get a bad manager, bad colleague. And what you're trying to do is just say, in every single team in the service, how do you get to the point where people can feel they can more or less be who they are? They're genuinely recognizing, and I do this big stuff around super strengths and encouraging people to think about their super strengths. So they're really recognizing what they've got in themselves, what they bring into themselves, the uniqueness, and just that feeling of, we all trot through life with all the ups and downs of it, but eventually being able to hold on to, look, what you're doing is great, and you try and feel that as many days as you possibly can, and that's going to help us look after your well-being and your psychological, mental, health. And with that comes, is your team genuinely inclusive? Are you making sure that everybody's able to have a voice at a meeting, that somebody is able to say, actually, why are we doing it like that? Why can't we challenge that a little bit? And my real thing about the kind of no blame culture we're trying to create here is, if people, high accountability, nobody's saying that people don't have to take accountability, but you get it wrong, and nobody gets it wrong. That what you haven't got is a manager that then goes on some great big witch hunt saying, oh, who got this wrong? What's this? What's happened? Because that's
Did
not
anybody die?
Anybody.
Yeah.
What you want is somebody to say, all right, okay, I can see that you made your best go of it. What would you do differently next time? Let's learn from that. Let's all move on, shall we? And not turn this into a great long saga. So I think they merge together around that individual sense of well-being, having not people put things on themselves that are just not natural. Like, I'm not an intelligent person. Yes, you are. You're just defining yourself by a very narrow.
You know what? My
thing.
missus knocked that on the head. I'm so excited by our conversation, honestly. I've written down 5 things there just to stop myself interrupting you, but I was brimming at the thing. So my missus, my sister's deputy head teacher. My missus is a secondary school teacher. And I regularly say that on the podcast, literally as you said it. You were like speaking into a choir. I go, oh, look, I'm not very intelligent. I didn't go and get a degree. My sister went to university. But my missus says to me, she's like, you really need to stop doing that, because obviously she loves me and she's really supportive. And she was like, what you should say, if you want to say anything, is you're not academic. So you didn't love school and you chose not to pursue that path. But intelligence and academia are different things. Very different things.
Totally.
She said, look at all the stuff you do. Look at the stuff you do inside the job, outside of the job, your children, the business stuff. You've got loads of intelligence. Yeah. She says, and I tell people, my partner's really intelligent.
If you want to do the questionnaire with me, I'll take you through it. This is one thing in my last year, I want to do this with everybody and get everybody to do this questionnaire you can do that works out your types of intelligence. And it literally allows people to think, of course you're intelligent. Very few people on the planet aren't intelligent, but we're so different. And, I went to university, frankly, to get away from home. And then sort of paid my way to go through it, but doing some of the most dodgy jobs in the world. But in the end, the fact that you're good at one thing, I mean, if you asked me to put together a cupboard when I was married, we got one of the things from IKEA, and it was a classic. And if you watch me, watching me put together,
how many marriages end in an IKEA car park?
A chimp would have done a better job than I would, honestly, in trying to put this thing together. So I'm completely crap when it comes to kind of literally putting a small cupboard together. My husband's saying, how can you be supposedly intelligent? You can't do this. Can't follow instructions, you name it. Thank God for YouTube.
Different type of intelligence, isn't it?
But come to doing something else, then I'm fine. So over the years, you start not punishing yourself for things you can't do, but recognizing what you can do. And I guess that's, for me, a lot of what inclusion is about, which is let's just celebrate the great stuff that people do. Let's not find things to beat each other up with that were never our strength in the first place.
It's how you measure it. One segue on that, by the way. I know a firefighter that started up a business, and I think it's like Heroes for Hire or something. I'm not going to promote it because I'm not going to say what the name is, but they do that. So you can hire them to come and put together IKEA. That's like the most thing that people hire firefighters, but in this particular thing he does. They hire people to come and put their stuff together. I'm sure lots of other people outside the sector do it. But yeah, it's like people like my dad, was in the building firm for 40 years. And he's just a really, really intelligent bloke, but no academia, any of that jazz. But he can see. What I loved about him, he can see things before they're there as well. Like he will look at a patch of grass. He's built so many houses, and he's like, "This is going to be here, that's going to be there, and this and this and this." And then, the ground solubility and the angle of repose and how the soil. And I'm like, what? And then he talks all about Archimedes and how the roof is built and all this sort of stuff. But he says and then he'll caveat it at the end with, I'm not an intelligent person. You said something there about super strengths, which I wrote down. Like in a job that I used to work in, I used to work for Mars. Do you know Mars, the company? Yeah. They make cat and dog food and Mars bars, and they own Nestle. And no, Nestle is their enemy. They own a lot, but they're really, really good. I think they're one of the biggest family-owned companies in the world still.
I think they are, yeah. But although the chocolate bars are getting shorter, I notice.
Yeah, cheeky buggers. But what they did do, they were amazing on personal development. And I was in the team where I was a CI lead, so continuous improvement. Right. And we went on the Six Sigma training, and we did the Kaizen, and we did all of that kind of jazz. And for me, oh my God, kid in a toy shop, like how to think differently, doing 5 hours and all this sort of stuff. And when you said super strengths, we used to have conversations like that around these types of things, because trying to find different solutions to TRS or waste reduction or water reduction or time or shadow boards or whatever it is, and all those marginal gains. You said you use stuff that you work with your team. Like, is that a kind of like strength builder thing? Is it a bell bin thing? Is it, what things have you seen well to work that you've adopted for your style? And again, we're not pretending you're going to give the golden answer of utopia here, but just some low hanging fruit where you've thought, you know what, if people are trying to open up conversations about this sort of stuff, maybe these are things that might be good to think about. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Godiva Limited. Godiva is one of the world's leading providers of specialist equipment for emergency services market. Godiva produces a comprehensive range of fire pumps, including vehicle-mounted, portable, and their cutting-edge integrated total water flow control system, SAMFlows. I've been using Godiva my entire career as a reliable pump on the fire ground. It is such a crucial element of a successful firefighting team that you want to empower your crews with the very best, reliable, quality product. Reach out to our partners by checking the notes in the podcast. Now back to the show.
I mean, one of the things we've just started with, we wrote a career document, like a career management document, and put it out there. And one of the things, funny enough, it sounds so simple, is that I listed in it loads of different types of skills and strengths. Because guaranteed, when you ask somebody, and I've done seminars around different teams, and talk to them about saying, so what do you think your super strength is? People get to about 2. They literally write 2 or 3. And partly because people can't see themselves very well, and they need other people to give them feedback. So we use something called Strength Scope, which is a really simple 360 tool. Not everybody's necessarily using it, and we keep pushing it. Lots of people have. But trying to encourage people to get, look, you're going to see yourself in a certain perspective. Guaranteed that somebody else is going to say, you're really good at that. But we literally listed all these different types of strengths, because sometimes they look small, but they're mega in terms of how somebody operates. So somebody's a really good detailed organizer. So a person called Amy who works with my team, the most organized, efficient person I've come across in a long time. She's just able to work at speed with detail and just get things organized. It's just an incredible skill to watch.
AI. She just
she's like the equivalent of some kind of Gemini AI. She's just superb. And then I look at different people in my immediate team, and you can see those different kind of strengths. And sometimes they're small things, but it accumulates to that bit. So somebody can look at something and think, does that look right? Does that seem right? You just said about your dad, for instance, looking at something. And you can see somebody who's a good conceptual thinker, where somebody else can look at that idea and think, well, I couldn't think of the idea, but I'm really good at seeing what will go wrong with it. And you want somebody to see, well, what goes wrong with it. So we used to
do pre-mortems, or you'd call them red teams sometimes, where we go, this is the day of the thing, and it's gone horribly wrong, You all need to come up with 10 reasons why it failed.
Yes.
And then we're gonna go through them. Okay, a meteor hit. Okay, outside our sphere of control and influence. And then you go through all of the list and all that sort of jazz.
And we're getting
that
better
healthy, like military do that, don't they? Military do red teams. Yeah.
So you said again.
So military do red teams. That's where that came from. We manifested it into sort of pre-mortems. You said about recognizing each other's strengths in that way. One of the ones we used to do in the old company. So we did a sunshine and shadows exercise, which is like Anne would sit in the middle, and we would say, Anne, you're really articulate when you step up and speak in front of a team, or whenever we've got a project to do and you're always happy to volunteer. Like, you're really articulate, you're really confident, you seem to be able to structure your words, your vernacular really, really well. You're a great orator. And then you give the shadow of it. So that's your sunshine. And then you go, as a result of that, honestly, like, I felt like really reluctant to contribute or even just stand next to you in part of these delivery things because it seems like you're just a lifetime ahead of me in terms of that speaking. And that was one thing I used to think was really good. The person was just allowed to acknowledge the feedback. But another one, which was probably less painful for the person, was you'd all get like a deck of 30 or 40 characteristics, and you had to give them all away to everyone in the team. So you say,
that's interesting.
Six people in your team or whatever, and you must get rid of all of your cards, and they put cards in front of you, and you have to get rid of all of them. So one of them would be, problem solving, greater building rapport, emotional thinking, long-term strategy, horizon scanning, whatever it is. And they weren't all complex like corporate words, but you had to give them away. And you say, well, if someone in the team has to do this, who would be your speaker? Who would be your completer finisher? Who would be the lead? Who'd be do you know what I mean? And that sort of, there's loads, people go on Amazon, there's probably loads of these decks of cards out there now, but they're really good tools, aren't they?
They are.
Just to create that, just to get the juices flowing, just to start. We used to do improvs. I don't know, we got straight down this rabbit hole, it's my fault. But we used to do improv games as well. Like, I did some stand-up comedy and improv training when I was in college, and we used to do that in our team. So you'd have to like follow on from each other. So it'd be like agree and amplify. So you would say something like, I went on a bus yesterday and it passed me, and I go, I absolutely love buses. I actually went on a bus 3 weeks ago and I saw John Legend on there. Do you know what I mean? And you're like, no way, I saw John Legend. And actually, when I first went to his you know what I mean? And it's just a think on the spot. Okay. Anyway, I'll drag us back out of that.
No, that's okay.
Drag us back out of that rabbit hole. So, how well received was some of this thinking? You said around our sector, we're getting better. I think we're getting a lot better. But someone said to me some time ago, they said, Pete, you're so open-minded, your brains fell out, which was obviously a backhanded compliment. Because sometimes we do come in with these very, very, very out there thinking. The fire service says, be yourself, just not like that sometimes. Do you know what I mean? It's happy to move slowly, handheld like a child. These are my words and not yours, because we are very traditional. And back when you said around inclusion, like maybe people point, they go, oh, they think it's about women and different people with different voices, different backgrounds, different coloured skin, because it's easy to point at the legislation and that says we should.
And it's about everyone. Because every single person at some point or other has felt that they weren't included in something, that's for sure. And the bit that worries me the most, I suppose, Pete, is that, and I suppose there's a couple of things going on, isn't it? I always say that when you get any kind of team, doesn't matter whether it's a station or any team in any organisation, and I've worked in different places, it's very easy for it to become like a gang. So everybody's in this gang and people want to belong to this gang. So all of a sudden, everybody in the gang is thinking, but I want to be more included and accepted in this gang than genuinely hold on to my views. And then what can happen, and I've had this about a bazillion times, where I've been in a visit to a station or a team, and wherever it may well be, and somebody may say nothing in the room, or they've got a lot to say in the room, and then somebody will follow me to the car park and say, actually, that's not my belief. Can I just talk to you about this thing? And then you have some conversation. And gradually, I've seen people learn that, challenge, and we've still got a long way to go, and this is just a human thing, isn't it? That it's difficult to learn to challenge. It's difficult in a really appropriate way. It's difficult to learn. I met for somebody at coffee this morning, for instance, had a really fantastic chat with him about what we can do with the well-being, and he's our well-being union rep. We had a really, really good chat. And what we were saying is, like, the email exchange isn't easy because it's easy to get kind of confused about what we're saying to each other.
The written word is a horrific way to correspond.
Let's just have a chat about what it is we're trying to achieve here. And all of a sudden you get a real kind of energy going between the two of you to say, let's do something really, really different and interesting. And we're all concerned about how do we improve psychological safety and make people feel able to say, I can't do that, or I need to learn more about that, or that was a mistake, but you move on from it, whatever it may well be. But that thing about people feeling sometimes they can't break out of the gang, otherwise they're not accepted. And that worries me a bit. And it worries me for the fact that people then feel they've got to be the same as the strongest voice in the room, or that they're going to really lose their capacity to learn and be what they're different. So I grew up with a bit of a stammer. And I was so lucky at early in my kind of early 20s, I suppose, and I still was very quiet. In fact, the great love of my life, the first person I went out with when I met him in university, and I was so quiet, which people won't believe now. He said to me, if you don't talk to me, I'm going to give you the elbow. And because I was kind of crazy about this guy, I really I know.
Obviously, it means the metaphorical elbow.
There are so many people since who wish that he'd shut up. But anyway, that whole conversation about, you've got to learn to speak to me. So I kind of, built that confidence. But when I started working, I was doing this research with this particular thing and got dropped into having to do the training for the research because the guy who was meant to do it went sick. And I worked with this so supportive guy, a kind of proper gardener manager. And he said to me, you're never going to get better in doing this until you do it. Just keep training, keep learning, keep building your confidence about being a trainer and a coach, and learn to kind of get over this kind of confidence issue around you speaking. And when the first time I ever spoke at a conference, I remember sort of coming off the stage afterwards, and he's dead now, bless his heart. And I just remember kind of coming back down the stage and saying, thank you, Phil. Had it not been for you, I would not have been able to do this. There's no way. And I suppose as I've gone through my entire career, I've tried to, wherever I can, find people all over the place and say, you're good, you're really good, you should do this. Look, recognize how good you are. And if teams are going to be together and they want to stay together, of course, I get it. But sometimes I have a horrible feeling that people end up hiding themselves under a bit of a shadow because they're not wanting to break out from that and say, but actually, I've got really good skills. So if we can find the balance between teams working together, watches teams, however people describe it, and saying, yeah, of course you want to kind of identify with each other, and people like to feel close and all of that. And human nature is such that we kind of cling together, but don't let it shadow each individual in the gang sort of thing, because it can mean you don't achieve what you want to achieve in your own life. And there's a really difficult balance in that for everybody.
Have we lost the ability, or are we lost is an extreme statement, are we losing the ability of healthy debate? I'm so frustrated we don't teach debate in schools.
Yes.
Because debate is so healthy. Like, I'm not going to ask you about the curriculum, but if there's things I would include in the curriculum, bit of forced 5-minute public, 3-minute public speaking, debate, give someone a topic and they've got 30 seconds and go, right, argue the advantages of pens versus pencils.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Whatever.
I know.
Just go, do a little bit of prep. That, because my mom didn't have a fantastic childhood, so family was massive for her. She really wanted, her goal was she wanted to have it. She did also become really successful financially, but that was like a lag measure. But family was her big thing. So whenever me and my dad would debate at the dinner table, she'd be like, please, let's not argue. I'm like, Mom, we're not arguing. We're not arguing. We're fencing. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we're poking the bear. Well, how about this? Well, how about that? Well, tell me, sitting at, as is probably no surprise when you hear me on a podcast, it's like sitting at our dinner table. If you don't speak, I mean, I'll try and drag you into a conversation. Like when my missus first met my family, I was like, hey, tell me your thoughts on this, Harry. What do you think about that? Because you've got to pull some people in, because there's so much energy. It's all love. No one ever falls out. No one ever throws drinks or swears or anything like that. But you're right. I think we're losing the ability to communicate. I think that's why podcasts have become more successful, because everyone's on their phone and they're all connected, but they've never felt so isolated. And we get trained on these, like we said before we started recording, you've been on various media shows. I really, really struggle with a lot of media shows because they'll go, right, today we're speaking with Ann Millington, Chief Kent. Ann, you've got 40 seconds, tell us about this. And 40 seconds. This is an enormously complex topic you just asked me about, and you're just looking for a soundbite. And I'm like, we've lost the ability to communicate. We're having fast food conversations.
Yes.
We're puddle jumping. And I think that's why, I think people I think they're wandering through a desert of communication, craving authentic, one-to-one. I'm trying to give Anne 90, 95, 96% of my attention now and really have a meaningful conversation about these interesting topics. But yeah, like,
it's difficult to do as well.
How do we get better at that? Yeah, well, like debate, communication.
I do a monthly update, and I'm sure people think sometimes, oh, she's just bullshitting about something. And you think, no, I'm definitely telling the truth. There are certain things I can't tell you because either we don't know the answer yet, or we're just putting the report together, or it's got to go to the authority first. But I'm not bullshitting anybody.
At your level, there's legal ramifications to certain things.
Well, exactly. I mean, you've got to tell the truth. There's no point messing around otherwise. But it's so hard to get that message. But certainly when you've had a camera shoved in your face when something's gone wrong, and you're just there. And as you say, they're literally saying, now explain how you're going to cope with these funding cuts. And you think, what, in the next 10 seconds, you want me to explain this? And what I worry about is that, most people are going to literally like chip paper. They're going to ignore that and off it's going to go. But all my colleagues in Kent in the service, and there's 1,610 of us precisely today, you suddenly think, but the message this is most going to hit are all the people who I work with. And they've got this 10-second soundbite of me trying to get a complex message.
And you didn't even mention that. Can't believe you didn't say this. What, in 10 seconds?
Yeah. And then people obviously get worried and they're concerned. And obviously everybody knows that there's potential funding cuts coming down the road as we speak, sadly. And then you're trying to get over... I mean, when all said and done, all fire and rescue services are also like a business. We're a £100 million business in reality. Yeah. So there's a lot of complex business stuff that goes with it. So you've had a conversation with somebody today who didn't realise we have to pay our utility bills. So you've got to pay the gas and electricity and the water rates, and you've got to pay all those things and business rates on the buildings. So all those things come out of it. And then it's very complex to get messages across. What we do have sometimes is people joining us at our corporate management board or strategic leadership board, where we do all our projects. And they come out of it saying, wow, I had no idea about some of the complexities of that. And it's fair enough. I mean, obviously, being a firefighter, being a protection person, all the different jobs that people do in the service to make it happen. They're all complex professions in their own right. So when they're sitting there and getting a sense of all these streams come together and it's all really complex, but the 10 seconds you've always got to try and get the message over, it is so hard. And we all spend our time as much as we can going around teams and talking about the issues for sure, but it's a really hard ask.
It is beyond a privilege to be able to bring the Firefighters podcast to you, and we are so grateful for every single person that supports, listens, shares, and follows our journey. But here's the honest truth. It takes a colossal amount of time and work to keep the podcast going. And to help us keep doing it, create more, reach more guests internationally, and make the podcast sustainable, we're asking for you to help. And to do this, we've set up a Patreon page. Now, by joining this, you'll not only support the future of the podcast, but also gain access to exclusive benefits. Now, if you've ever wanted to meet a member of the podcast, buy us a beer, buy us a coffee, and you think anything you've ever listened to on the podcast has been worth £3, that's basically what we're asking you for. By joining our Patreon community, you will get access to every single full episode archive we have ever made. Now, hundreds and hundreds of key documents that we've got in there on fire behavior, firefighter health, cancer risks, incident debriefs, and so much more. A growing collection of valuable resources to help you learn and grow. Your support in whatever way, dropping it in the WhatsApp group, sharing it on the local newsletter, whatever it is, it's incredibly valuable, and we really do support it, and we need it to make it a long-lasting resource, that legacy resource we always talk about for first responders, firefighters, and everybody everywhere who's ever been interested in joining the fire service. Now, if you're already supporting something, as many people do, it's totally cool. You can still access the podcast for free, and you'll always be able to access all the new episodes for free, but we're asking for your help to make this sustainable. And we want to keep growing, we want to keep sharing the insights, and we want to keep showcasing the incredible work happening in our community and our sector. So if you feel like you want to join the Patreon crew and help us make this possible, head to patreon.com/TFFPC or check the link in any episode podcast notes. Communication is the grease, isn't it? That makes things move slowly. Because if people don't understand the why, someone shared a great change management flow with me the other day. It wasn't the the Kubler-Ross curve or whatever it was. It was one that had like a grid and it was missing certain things. I might try and Google it in a minute. I keep forgetting is it the Knox? I don't know. It was something, but basically said, if you're missing one thing, it said like, if you're missing a vision, it causes confusion. If you're missing skills, it causes fear. Do you know what I mean? And you had to have all 5 for successful change. And if you're missing one of them, and obviously in all of them, you had to have communication. You had to have lots of communication. There's a few things I want to pull on from that. Let's go for complex versus complicated first. The difference between complex and complicated systems, I always say to people like, I could build a car. Take me years because I'm not very good at it. I've never done it before, but it's just a really complicated system. But if I followed all the steps and found the manuals, and I'm not diminishing mechanic skills, but do you know what I mean? It's a complicated thing, but you could do it. There's just 17,000 steps to it. Organizations are complex because they have so many isms, they have so many interpersonal dynamics to them. There's so many external factors blowing against the wind of each side of the building. A lot of the jobs that we do as firefighters, boots on the ground, some are complex, some are complicated. People will say fire is complex, but then like we've had a lot of international fire behavior speakers on, and some of them go, we love to say it's complex, but it's actually just chemistry and physics. A bit of an annoying answer because that is complex as well. But what I wanted to ask is, given how complex organizations are now, and your budget, like you said, is whatever, 100 million, but pretty much every fire service is a multi-million pound company these days.
Always.
And with so many complexities, from legal to governmental to legislative to procurement to human resources and, hiring and sacking and yank 'em and rank 'em and all that sort of jazz, do you think we are developing firefighters, me, to still be able to realistically aspire to those positions? Because there's a thing about, I think it's called the Peter Principle, where you get promoted to a level just beyond your ability. I'm just wondering, and we go, right, Pete, you're a good firefighter. You should be a crew manager. Well, no, because I'm a great firefighter. Do you know what I mean? And maybe firefighter, crew manager, watch manager, similarities, responsibilities, blah, blah, blah. But when you start punching above those, it's a different skill set. It's a different skill set. I always say to people going from station manager and above, I'm like, your biggest tools now has got nothing to do with what you know about BA or building construction or hazardous materials or whatever, because you're not going to pick up a hose and a ladder and a branch and a thing. Your tools are your words most of the time. Your communication is going to be your biggest tool. How much have you been sharpening that? Leadership is your practice. How much have you studied leadership? And I'm not saying I know anything at all, but I'm like, what are you optimizing for? And if I asked you now, like with our firefighters and with our members of our team, what are we optimizing for? Are we setting ourselves up for success? I spoke to Phil Garrigan. No, it wasn't Phil. It was Mark Baxter. And I said, do you think you could become chief again if you joined today? And he'd go, yeah, I think I could, because I'm not being egotistical, but I'm really driven and I don't sit still and all this jazz. But I was like, I'm not sure firefighters, it'd be very, very rare to find a firefighter who was going to develop themselves in the ways required to be involved, because there's been so many financial disasters across the UK Fire and Rescue Service because we've put people in positions. They're not stupid, they're not irresponsible, they're not dangerous, lazy, whatever. It's just not their skill set. It is not their skill set. But then on the flip side of it, with respect to you and Dawn and everybody else and direct entry, people are, we're giving our jobs away to people outside of the sector. And I'm like, it's a different job.
Well, you can imagine
Dawn, Ann, whoever, they're never going to be stood in front of a building saying, right, 2BA, please. Doesn't matter that they do or don't know about the
you'd
thing.
expect me to say, yes, of course, because, I'm trying to
but if she's that close to the tip of the sword, something's gone horribly wrong.
It's too long a story to tell you how I got from HR to director to chief on another day, Pete. But chief I ended up being. So arguably the direct entry was coming as HR director. And of course, I remember at the time, and some of it was a bit nasty as well. People saying, how on earth can you be a chief and all the rest of it? And I remember saying exactly what you just said, but it's a different set of skills. But to go back to the question, I think, of course, you can have firefighters come through in terms of being chiefs. But you've got to, I think there's a few things that are going on with that, though. Firstly, and there's a kind of great graph that says the more senior you become, the more it's got to change from practical skills to conceptual thinking. You've got to really help people think about that kind of conceptual thinking stuff, because you are now tackling with kind of more and more kind of complex, different moving parts, and you've got to try and get your head around a lot of that. So we've kind of introduced a lot of leadership training in this last couple of years. I always feel ashamed that we haven't done more, but money was such. But at the moment, we're saying, no, let's make sure we get leadership training right from the early bit. So you've got to have people who actually really want to do it. Because let's face it, the leaders that we most need, and it's a very different job, the crew managers, and obviously Green Book equivalents here, but let's stay with operational for a minute. But the crew managers and the station leaders, the watch managers, are hyper important. So when we talk about leadership, that first step from firefighter to crew is arguably one of the most difficult. It really is. Because all of a sudden, and you know this as well as I do, the people who've been part of the gang, and then they literally start to manage other people, and it's really tough because people are going to act out, and what gives you the right to now manage me, and this, that, and the other, and what's your skill base. So you've really got to support people through that transition. Yeah. And you've got to make sure that they do transition, that they don't try and still be one of the mates, because every survey in the world, in every organization you can ever name of forever, will say that the most important person for people is their team leader. And that literally is universal, every organization on the planet. So it will literally say the person that will be the most important in terms of who you need to trust, who guides where the team's going, is your obviously in our world, the watch manager. And then by the time you start becoming a station manager and above, for sure, in reality, you're doing really different jobs now. And by the time you get to a group manager, area manager, the board, you're running the business. You're doing all of that stuff. And obviously, you're trying to create an amazing service. And I always say we're a business that delivers a fantastic public service. But you've got to learn the money, the politics, the HR, the law. There's something like 287 pieces of legislation that affect the fire and rescue service, and we just counted them. A great guy called Paul Goodwin's just done a load of fantastic work for us, literally kind of putting them all together, and we shared that with the sector. And you've got to be compliant with them all. So you've got to, you've got to understand what you're doing. But you've got to expose people to that bit by bit as they're coming through careers. And then you do find people who are amazing. And one of the things I really pulled back on, and there was a conversation in the sector at one point about, should we make sure that people are coming in with more qualification? So arriving with degrees. And I remember a chief, gone now, left retired a few years ago, and he was saying, I really think we should ask for more GCSEs and this, that, and the other. And I reject that, actually. I really do. I think, no, you still want people to come in who are bringing all of their different types of intelligences, respecting the firefighting as a profession in its own right. And I always go bang on about this, that it's a profession. It's like a doctor. It's like a quantity surveyor. It's a profession. We should treat it like that. But if in that profession you want to move up, you can't just bring your technical skills up and up and up and up and up. You've got to learn, and you just said it earlier. I mean, it's an interesting debate, isn't it? I know that in Germany, and I've used this a few times, in a perfect world, if the money, let's assume that money wasn't a problem. I know it's a bit,
No, let's go to that utopia.
Let's assume money wasn't a problem. You'd be paying, yeah, let's talk utopia. What utopia would look like is that you'd be paying firefighters more money in the first place. So you really would be saying, okay, let's really recognize the professional skill set that comes with this. And one of the things we're doing at the moment is creating a kind of pathway to mastery. So you're not doing sheep dipping of the same training you did as a firefighter and when you first joined 40 years later. So it's going to take us a couple of years to get this right, but we really want to make sure that we're now honouring that huge increase in expertise that people are kind of finding as they go, as they get more into the profession. And they're learning all the specialisms and all that, and you're paying for it properly. And then from there, and I say in German systems, they still do this. You have dual tracking. So you have some people who are coming up because they are technically gifted, and you're putting them into posts, even at pretty senior level, and they're not necessarily your best managers, but they're good technical experts. But you're also bringing up your managers. So you're saying, and I can think of somebody I've been coaching now, crew manager, undoubtedly going to be a great watch manager, and I do a lot of coaching wherever I can. So and what he's learning and what other people are learning is, okay, I've got these great technical skills, but now I need to learn the craft of leading other people. How do you have a difficult conversation? How do you give great feedback to somebody? How do you make sure you are supporting somebody who goes into mental health crisis? How do you know how to set some rules in your team where you're saying, I'm not going to, the easiest way to stamp out sexual harassment on stations is for the team leader to sit there and in effect say, I won't have it. Not me. I mean, as a chief, I can say, till the cows come home. And I do. But what you want is every team leader to sit there and say, I just won't have it. Let's just all agree that we won't tolerate this. Not a woman to a man to a woman, man to man, woman to whoever it is. And everybody can be clumsy. I call it clumsy, creepy, and criminal. Everybody can say the wrong thing. Of course they can, me included. So every now and again I can walk into a station and see somebody hyper cute and think, cute. And I have to be really, really make sure I don't say anything daft. And then you've got the creepy, where people have really kind of crossed that line. But the rule setters are the managers and the people within that team, for sure. And if we set those rules, they're done. Well, how do you teach somebody to do that? So there are people who genuinely emerge, who really want to learn those skills. They really want to move on. It's not just trying to, last year before retirement, get up the pension. That those aren't conversations that we want. We want the people early in career who are starting to say, actually, I quite like the idea of really being part of what creates the service, what takes it forward, what brings new innovations. And the exciting people to work with are very often those people who are challenging you. Say the coffee I had this morning, where somebody's saying, well, I think we could do this better. And they're not being attacking. They're really trying to influence me. And they are such exciting conversations when you've got firefighters, everybody in the service, different people, different places, saying, let's do that better. And then you think, great, okay. And I don't know how many times I've turned around to somebody and said, have you thought about going more into management? You've got some really interesting conceptual ideas here.
No.
And then as ever,
is it the problem though that they have to pass through the same door?
Oh no.
So I love what you said about, so in Mars again, I never usually mention it, but it's coming up a lot in this one. We used to have, I think they were called P's and B's. So you could be a P1, P2, 3P, and a B. It was personal and business, I think, were the two classifications. So if you were business, you were plant-based, like you worked in a factory. I started as whatever it was, a B2 or something like that, working on machines, changing gearboxes, blah, 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 filling pouches, doing cans. And then you do like a cell, you lead a cell of people, 4 or 5 people. And then you might be a line manager, which just means you manage a line of product. And then you'd be a shift manager, blah, 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 blah. But you couldn't transition from like a B5 straight to a P5 because it's a different skill set. And in the same way, like you might have someone, I mean, let's say like in your organization or any other, the head of data and analytics or something like that, they might only have 1 or 2 people that answer to them in their team versus, a station manager's got 5 stations, 2 stations, 3 stations, 60 staff plus whatever it might be. Totally different skill set, because sometimes the people that don't have the people skills but are really good, maybe introverts, great with data. You mentioned the young lady that you work with, and they're like, well, that's a really important skill set, highly valuable, but the next promotion level puts them into, go and manage 60 staff over there, and they're rubbish at it. I see this in government. I know we're not going to get onto government conversation, but when you go, so-and-so from here transfers to this department, and you're like, it's a different skill. It's a completely different skill set. You see it with, again, like a station manager in charge of 2 stations versus a station manager in charge of procurement or workshops. And they might have 1 crew manager that works for them and then some mechanics in the garage. Totally different skill set. They've got to be up on all the legislation and all the procurement projects and the legal requirements around that, and finger on the pulse and reading all the sheets and track and trace all the kit and where it's come from. Let's maybe flip this. I'd love to do some coaching actually. Let's flip this. So I want to progress. We spoke about before we came on, like, I used to want to do your job. I thought, I'll be a chief fire officer. And maybe I still do. But the thing I wanted to do was really make a meaningful impact. I wanted to try and help shape things and stuff. And then this podcast thing accidentally manifested out the back end of it. But if I really do want to progress, to be able to help shape things, I feel like I've got the confidence to push my ideas forward, what areas should I be working on? Because one of my frustrations, you said about one of the biggest things is, that first step from firefighter to crew manager, watch manager, whatever it is, you don't do your person in the mirror, your executive leadership program until you get into the upper echelons, at which point there might be a colossal amount of damage already in your wake because the leadership development didn't start early enough. You have these revelations where you go, oh my God, I've been doing this for the last 15 years. No wonder that last team hated me, or no wonder I could never manage the thing. Like, from the buffet of things you've spoken about, what do you think? And again, Kent's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but what do you think those things that people in their first steps of leadership should really be looking into? And if you had a child in the fire service, or if you were coaching me, and again, I know everybody's different, but it's like, what things would you say, Pete, this might not be offered by your organization, but I would consider trying to find someone that's good at this? What are the areas, what are the hollow spots, do you think?
I think, just from my own experiences of kind of, you start off wherever you start off and you do that first management job. Some of it is trying to help people think about their emotional resilience. So there's definitely something about resilience, because sometimes it doesn't matter what job you're in. One of the things said about chiefs sometimes is, they're very isolated. I think any person can feel isolated. And as a manager, turning around to their team and a day and saying, we're going to do this thing because I don't think we're doing it very well, they can go back into their office, and I'm pretty certain they're going to feel isolated in that moment. And they most probably know that their team are going to sit there and say, what do the elders know about this or she know about that, and all those things that happen, which is sad but true. So there's some emotional resilience there. And with that, I think some of those first building blocks are, and it sounds odd, but are they able to express the difficult things? Can they say? So if people start with confidence and being able to think, do you think you'd be able to turn around to a person or a team in a team meeting and in effect say, let's have a conversation? So how do you facilitate a conversation? How do you have conversation? I think we said it earlier, didn't we? Teaching people to debate. The first steps, and we're now doing those first steps, are definitely about, you're going to have to articulate ideas. You're going to have to say difficult things. You're going to have to challenge people. Let's help you learn how to articulate some of those issues, because you won't be doing yourself a favor or your team if you ignore bad things. And what you ignore becomes your culture, doesn't it? It's an old cliche, but it's true. If you watch bad things happen and you say no, in the end, it's the acceptable culture. Where if in reality you bring somebody into the office and say, look, I just watched you do something. Come on, you and I both know that that's kind of crossed a line. Let's talk about it. Let's done. Now, to do that for the first time, there is definitely a resilience. There's a confidence, getting your language right, getting your words right.
Jump into that muddy puddle and sit there. Yeah,
it's definitely a puddle. You come out of it, you go home, and I live on my own. So the number of times I've come home and sat here and thought, I'd pay to be married round about now, just so you could turn to somebody and say, God, that was a crap day. And it was difficult to say that. And, I've come home and now I'm sitting here stewing. Did I say exactly the right thing? And the weird thing is, I'm 62. You never, ever, ever, I think, come to terms with, or I didn't anyway, maybe just speak personally.
Did you just say you're 62?
Oh, bless your heart for that. I'm 62. I don't think you ever come to terms with.
You look great.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you.
I'm not. So I know this is a recorded podcast. Sorry, I'm not going to. That sounded cringy.
You can put me one of those friends that advocate people on dating apps. I'm just thinking about doing a dating app.
Yeah, carry on.
Nightmare. Anyway, but that whole thing about.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I've been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents, and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
For me personally, I don't like it. I'll speak really personally for a minute, Pete. I don't like it sometimes, and like the budget coming, you have to do really difficult things. And then having to turn to the organisation and saying, look, I'm really sorry, it's going to be tough. It really is going to be tough. And in my October update, I'm going to be saying that. And then that people will be angry and they want somebody to be angry with, and you almost represent that for them. But that can be true for a watch manager or a crew manager too. So you think, how do you help people come away? Like, where's their network to be able to say to somebody else, actually, that felt tough and I just want to work through, did I say the right things? How do I get better? And the idea that you learn it once is not right. I think you're always learning it. The rest of your life, you're thinking, how do I improve that? How do I... And I've got little kind of, I suppose, little scripts that I've got in my head now that I've learned over the years.
I have
So
little
when
hooks, little isms, little things that slip me into and again, I always say I would encourage everybody, even just with your friend, with your family member, with anybody, put your phone down and record yourself having a conversation together.
Yeah.
It ain't got to be about anything, but because listening back to myself has been one of those where I'm like, oh, for God's sake, Pete, you're bloody waffling again. Or you just swore again. I used to swear loads on the podcast. You swear way too much. It's so unnecessary. Yeah, no, you're not really though, but like, I swear too much.
I'm going to put on screen something that I'm not wanting you to say, but that is next to my desk. And he's got a fox on it. So somebody can work out what I'm doing. But I am famous for not being bad. I'm very bad at swearing, unfortunately. But
the limits of your language are the limits of your world. As someone said this to me ages ago, and it made me go, I really need to develop my ability to articulate my thoughts, because otherwise it comes out and it fumbles and I end up hitting Anne with the elbow and stepping on her toe and headbutting by accident. It's like, a conversation is a dance, isn't it? And
it's
I'm like, my thing, and you know what the best thing about it is? The world is there to practice on. You can practice it everywhere.
That's a great line.
Anybody you meet, you can interact with them. It's absolutely fine. They might think you're a bit of a weirdo. Doesn't matter. People at the checkout are forced to speak to you. Yeah,
we're all weirdos anyway, aren't we? I think I got past that idea that I'm a weirdo. I just think, we're all weirdos. We're all funny fish. But the funny thing is, and I say to people all the time, and one of the great things about my team, and I love them, is that we rehearse things a lot. So we'll sit at corporate management board and we rehearse the ideas. We go through it. It takes time. And I say to people all the time, if you're just about to have a difficult conversation with somebody, for heaven's sake, go and rehearse it first. Go and talk to HR or me or somebody and say, I'm going to say this. Does this seem right? And I will do that all the time with my team. If an email going to go out, sometimes I'll check it first. Does this seem cool? And you're thinking, for a start, you're not trying to think of yourself as the top expert on everything. It's stupid. You want other people's ideas about, I'd nuance that, I'd change that if I were you, that doesn't come over right. And you end up with a much better product. And you get rid of ego and you try and, I always say this is one of my little lines. I'm not trying to be right. I'm just trying to get it right. So there's a whole thing about get rid of your ego and just make sure that you're making sure that you facilitate all these great people around you to put their 2 pence into it. And it took a long time to learn that. And I'd say the biggest single thing is getting people to help build your confidence as you do it. Get your coaches, get your mentors, get your mates, get people who say nice things to you. Don't get the people who bring you down. Get the people who are saying, you're really good at that. I saw you do that, mate. That was really spot on. Well done, you. And the one thing, I know we're running out of time now, the one thing I'd say to people they can do, not at all. It's like a gift that if you said to people, you're at a station, you're in a team, turning around to somebody else and saying, just watch you do that. That was spot on. Brilliant. Love the way you do that. Love your judgment on that. You're really funny when you do that. It really comes over. And people, just those little gifts of feedback just make a difference.
You've got to champion each other. The world is ready to kick you in the proverbials every day.
Yeah,
and
every day.
Why be doing it to yourself? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You spoke earlier around gardener leaders. I think that was the term you used.
Yeah.
What's that? Unfold that one a bit for me. And also, we keep talking about coaches. Could I ask you to maybe go into like mentors versus coaches?
Yeah.
Because these words they're like buzzword bingos, and people go, "Oh, I need to get me a coach," and they go to the service, say, "Give me a coach," and you're like, "Well, it's a very personal thing." Like, explore those, unfold those three topics for me.
They're very, very different. A gardener manager, and it's an old term nowadays, but I like it, is somebody who definitely wants to grow you. They're really invested in, wherever you start, they are constantly, and I'd like to think of myself in this way, you're spotting great people all the time, you have conversations, you're making sure that you're saying thank you for things, but not just thanks. Thanks isn't enough. Sometimes there's bits of, you did that really well. I mean, somebody just sent me a document, physical fitness document. I shall name them actually, Mick Jackson and James Perry. They've just done a superb piece of work in putting together our physical fitness policy. So you go back and say, I love this. It's superb, really well articulated of what we're trying to achieve. And funny enough, they're gardener managers. They really want to make sure that they're investing their energy into what we're trying to do around physical fitness and all the kind of mental health thing that comes with it. So somebody who's just genuinely invested in other human beings and wanting to do the right thing and bring them up. And that's where the mentor coach comes in. I still see a coach as somebody who is very specifically. So I was one of my only claims to fame in life around being fit. I was a badminton champion under 18s when I was in Wales.
I love
broke my legs
badminton. Me and my
a few
mum
years
used to play
later.
it all the time. I love it.
Oh, I love badminton. I can't play it now because of my damn leg, because I've got bolts in it. But I remember being very specific coaching, and that classic thing about, hit it more like this, do that. So it's more precise. It's much more about, I watched you do that presentation. You need to do a better intro. You're not clear on this. It's much more precise. You're literally taking somebody from A to B in a guided way. And mentoring is to a certain extent the same, but it's a longer relationship. And I've usually found that mentors have found that you can't pick them. You can pick coaches because they bring you a very specific skill set. A mentor comes along almost by accident, certainly in my life, where you've ended up talking to somebody and it's a bit more conversational, arguably. They're allowing you to sort of explore a little bit and, what we're trying to do. And arguably you're trying to do that in your own team, but sometimes you're the wrong mentor. Sometimes you need somebody from another team. And you just find the conversation is more natural with somebody. And you're saying, I find this problem. And they say, well, okay, let's talk about that. And it's less specifically guided, but much more where somebody might say, you just might want to reflect on that or have a little think about this. So it's an investment thing again, that somebody's over a longer term just paying attention. We did some reverse mentoring a little while ago, and it was really interesting. I had a crew manager who was my reverse mentor. We went for coffee. I need to do it again, actually, to find somebody else to do this with me. And it was very interesting to have somebody, like we kind of shared our worlds, I suppose, from that perspective. And then what were we trying to achieve in our jobs? And then what was his perspective of how I might do this? It was really interesting. So I'm much sure you're just about to do it again, but you need the person who's doing it for the right reasons. I don't want somebody to just sit there and criticize me. I'm getting that all the time.
Those people they're really, really, really hard to find. I actually, I wasn't gonna speak about this, but I will speak about it. Do you know who Rob Barber is?
Yeah.
Lovely man. Met him quite some time ago, and he invited me for lunch, and we just poured into each other, connected on a variety of different topics. Obviously, Rob very suddenly and sadly passed only 2 days ago. Short-term sudden illness, which I don't know any more about at this point, but honestly, like,
I know, so very
that man he was just so, he was like, he was very unexpected because he looks a bit like me. He's a bold white male, muscular, knuckle dragging looking kind of firefighter. But you talk about that intelligence. Again, not potentially academic, but such an intelligent man. The way he thought about it. And I said to him, like, when he said, oh, Pete, let's go for lunch. And I was like, okay, I think you're going to be really disappointed with taking me to lunch. And he said, no,
you'd be a good companion.
Well, no, but he said, I love speaking to really interesting people. How do they see things? How did they get into doing what they're doing? And this weird podcast thing that you're doing. And he wasn't trying to get on the podcast or anything like that. We didn't book anything. It was nothing like that. But he was just like, the way you're going about this and the way you're going about that is real. And it was just like praise. And then I solicited some more feedback from him, and we were having some such really great conversations. And so much of that happens accidentally, like you said. You kind of have to discover these people for yourself. You can't really prescribe.
No, you can't.
You could prescribe a coach in like, okay, you need to get better at presenting. Okay, here's a great presenter coach. But it's hard to find those people inside your organizations. In the organization that I work for, I think one of our greatest leaders is a guy that actually runs our health and safety department. And he's obviously Green Book. And his emotional intelligence, his humor, his ability to build rapport, his planning, his memory recall is like, it's there. It's just at the end, everything he can pull from such, and maybe that's why he's great in health and safety. He's just he is a chameleon. He is amazing. And when people ask me about stuff, because I'm just a watch manager in the place that I work at. But when people ask me about stuff, I'm like, consider finding a mentor like that guy over there, because he would be great for what you're trying to do. And some of them go, oh no, he's in health and safety, or that person's in finance, and I'm like, You're missing the goddamn point.
Yeah, you're missing the point.
You're missing the
You want the
point.
person, not the post.
Yeah. How do we crack that nugget? That's the big one that challenges me. All right, I want to change gears. I've been speaking for an hour already. I'm absolutely loving this. You were honoured, rightfully so, and I want to bring this up because I know you're not going to bring it up. You got an OBE in the King's Honours. Massive, huge recognition. Congratulations. Could you give us a little bit of detail around how that manifested and what it was awarded for?
I never use it. You know that, don't you, Pete? I never.
I had to find it.
Yeah, I never do. I never put it on my name or anything. So I'm surprised you said that. The weird thing about it is my mum had not long died. So when I got a phone call saying that you've got this, I have to say the first thing is I burst into tears because I thought my mum's not going to know. So that was my first reaction to it, which was some sadness. And
people that have poured so much into you, and you're like, they don't get to see the thing.
I used to go up and down to Wales every other weekend for 18 years. In fact, the thing said mostly in the services, are you in Wales this weekend? And the bereavement's been awful, as it is for everybody when they lose a parent. But when it came to it, I then spoke to my two brothers, and they were just so lovely, and they came down for the ceremony. And I guess as ever, you always end up thinking, OBE stands for other buggers' effort. So you always end up thinking, you're kind of taking somebody else's shine from them, and all the rest of it. So you're just trying to make sure.
I've never heard that one before. I love that.
Oh yeah, it's a classic, isn't it? Okay. I remember somebody getting an OBE. That's why years ago, and everybody said, "Oh, other buggers' efforts," that one. But I'd done a lot of national work, and I suppose it was I was very pleased that to recognise it was. But I suppose what it meant more weirdly was sitting on with my family on that day in Windsor, and we'd not long lost Mum, and both my brothers came down, and they don't come out of Wales very often. And my niece and my nephew and the family and all the rest of it. And we sat having lunch, and I got tinnitus, so it's a bit of a saga being in the restaurant with me because I can't hear if there's lots of noise around me. Yeah. But I think what was gorgeous was the three of us just having this kind of big hug at the end, and the two of them saying, like, really proud of you, and said, and I'm just as proud of you. And like I said, my dad was a copper, he was a constable. My brother WhatsApped me and said, reality is, you're a copper's daughter from a very working class background, and I'm just so proud that you managed to.
You have just ripped it off the launch pad.
I knew that was a long journey to find confidence. So it was, and people think that. I think they assume that because you're a chief, you must have buckets of confidence, and you think, no, it's learned. It's you learn it along the way. I'm born with all this confidence. You kind of, you have to learn it, and you have to keep preserving it. And sometimes, I'm less confident than other days. But it was gorgeous just to sit with my family, and on the whole, then I don't really share it outside that I got it because I don't want people. I suppose because
you don't want to lord it over
like
people now.
Further should get an OBE, that you're recognising that you ain't on your own, that it really does take that. It sounds so bloody naff when you say it, but it's true. It takes the 1,610 people who work with me, and they do work with me. I call them colleagues. I hate the word staff. It's a real thing. Everybody knows I'm obsessive about, if I see staff in a policy, I instantly know it's colleagues. And we did a survey on it about 6 years ago saying, do you prefer to be called colleagues or staff? And people say, actually, I like the idea of colleague. And so do I, because you're saying it genuinely is a team effort. So I suppose sometimes when you get these individual awards, they can feel a bit odd because you're thinking,
I know.
But it takes everybody. But at the same time, I will own it's not exactly been an easy go in fire. It's been a hard job. It's had some, I work many hours, and I think on that basis, I did take some pride in thinking it was nice to be acknowledged for a bucket worth of work, both national and local. So yeah, I'm waffling now, Pete. I feel embarrassed.
No, you're not. I'll put you on a spot and you're blushing, but it reminds me of
I'm blushing. I never mentioned.
Not to make any assumptions of her music choices, but there's a Snoop Dogg clip where he's standing, he's got a star on the Hall of Fame, and he's like, I want to thank this, I want to thank that, and most of all, I want to thank me. I want to thank me for believing in me. I want to thank me for all the effort I put in. Oh,
it's a great line.
And you're like, you know what? There's nothing wrong with that, So,
yeah.
MSA are supporting us on today's podcast, and I chose to partner with them because I've been wearing this stuff for nearly 20 years. And they are the global leader in development, manufacture, and supply of incredible, safe products that really protect people, not just our communities out there, but also first responders, most importantly, all over the world. Get yourself over to MSA and have a look at it. The high-performance protective clothing for emergency services responders. They also partner with us on the UK Pink Firefighters. It's because we love them. The helmets with the reflective visor, the F1XF, absolutely epic helmet. and not forgetting how they improve firefighter safety through their connectivity in the connected firefighter platform. MSA are always pushing the envelope, and it's a real privilege to be able to continue to grow our partnership together. So whether it's your PPE, your bunker gear, your helmets, your SCBA, your thermal imaging, your Luna, or your portable gas detection, both of us know that this equipment needs to work. It needs to be high quality, reliable, and dependable in the moment. And that's why I use MSA, because they know what's at stake. Rinsing all the way back to sort of local leaders, people. Someone said to me only a short while ago, actually, I need to remember who it is to attribute it to. I apologize, but if people are back at the podcast, they might remember it. They said, if you can't see a role model across the dinner table, you're already at a massive disadvantage.
Oh, it's true. It's true.
You need to have, so like, who were those role models for you? Because yes, you've put in a massive bucket ton of effort. You've mainlined the caffeine and revved that cognitive horsepower to the red line, probably for a lot of your career. But you said your dad was in the police, you had your mum. Like, how have you leapfrogged, swung from branch to branch of role models to find yourself accidentally where you are now? What did those role models look like for you?
And by accident is always true, isn't it? Nobody ever chooses where they end up being. It's just so random. I think, it's like everybody. I've talked to so many people in the service as well. It always starts with your parents. My dad had been a Japanese prisoner of war, so he had significant mental health problems. So, I ended up doing psychology.
He was a Japanese prisoner of war.
Really, now you'd call it a complex PTSD issues, because they're undoubtedly that was the case.
Jesus.
And he raged, and it was difficult. At the same time, I also watched a man who, and he lost his mum at 3, and he was a bloody, such a tough life, and he suffered undoubtedly when he came home. But at the same time, did his job, did it well. We had about 450 people at his funeral, so he was, hugely engaged in the community, and we have a small village in Wales, all the rest of it. So, he was somebody I admired. And one of the things I admired about him is God knows he could rage and shout and all the rest of it, but he wouldn't take hypocrisy at all. Didn't like any of that. One of the reasons he stayed a constable, like any nonsense from anybody. Never quite learned the political game, put it like that. And sometimes you've got to learn some of it.
That's where I struggle, I think. I get in my own way with stuff. That's and
I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm not sure. I remember somebody saying to me once, "You're very easy to pull, but you're not easy to push." So I'm one of my managers, and I thought, but isn't that true for most of us? We prefer to be pulled, not pushed. So there's a kind of, I can be pulled along very easily with what you think about, but somebody just telling you to do something, I can feel all of that bugger off kind of reaction.
You remember the story of the sun and the wind trying to get the guy's coat off?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, blows
exactly
hard and hard, and hurricanes, and he just grabs the tiger, and the sun just goes, hey, and then he just takes it. I know it's a silly metaphor for people, but you're like, there's 2 ways to go about this,
Yes, there is, and definitely that. And then my mum being, watching her kind of try to support this guy that clearly had a lot of issues. So you learn your first stuff from your parents and brothers and family. And then I worked in Tesco's when I was 15. So 15 to 18 before I went to uni, worked 3 nights a week, all day Saturday, Sunday. And watching people work bloody hard. And and these are in the days when Christmas was for about 3 days, it was closed. And if you were put on bread, it was like, I don't know if anybody's worked in retail who's listening to this. It's hell. So when you were and this is back in,
I worked at Marks and Spencer's, where everyone would come and collect all their Christmas food. It was absolute
that's all posh in Marks and Spencer's. When you're in Tesco's, it was literally the bread aisle was like being told you were going to hell. And the number of times I got bread, and a guy called Billy Morn, no longer with us sadly, used to come down and was just great at doing that kind of, well done, girl, well done, and all in Welsh and in those days, all the rest of it, well done, keep going, because it was hard work all day. So your managers like that, friends along the way, people like Phil when I was in Bexley, my old Bexley team, and still friends, I have to say. And there have been people, not always managers, but people that you watch do something and think, God, that's clever. God, that's kind. And the people I've loved the most as I've gone along in life, there's no doubt about it, and again, it sounds sort of naff, but it's true, is when you watch a manager or watch a person thinking, that was such a kind way of doing that, that was nice. And I'd like to think that what you accumulate is, you've got to do tough things, but as much as possible, you try and do it with kindness. You try and do it with what's the most sensitive way you can deal with this. And you learn that from watching people, think about friends with their kids and just watching how they operate. So I think you learn your trade from everywhere. Listen to podcasts, read thousands of books.
Someone said to me again the other day about connect before correct, which was a lovely little, my mind is full of these silly little quotes. And I'm like,
I like that.
Yeah, people want to know you care first. It's the whole, they don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. And if you know, when I've seen people do disciplinaries, and I went through a disciplinary actually, and you go, there's ways you can do this. The reality is the reality. It is what it is. You're looking at this big dead fish on the table and we've both got to eat it. But, I've not got to hit you with it while we're going. I've not got to scowl at you and, make lots of values judgments and all of this mess that I'm going to throw into this conversation. It doesn't belong.
But wouldn't it be lovely to prevent that? What I'd love to do.
So you said about failing safely, right at the beginning of our... Yeah. So how do we teach people about failing safely? Because yes, you said you framed it beautifully earlier. Clumsy, criminal,
and
what was
criminal?
Clumsy. Yeah. The creepy is probably where a lot of people unfortunately sit, but the clumsy and the criminal. Let's just try and separate the black and white there for a second. A lot of people, as we're going through these cultural changes, make clumsyisms. The way they speak, the thing they forgot, the lack of consideration about this because of their unknown unconscious bias, because of their, that they didn't realize they had this unseen privilege or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Some people sometimes get reward points for correcting stuff. They go, Anne, you didn't say this. You said that. Okay,
I know.
Yeah. And then people get so scared, and then we struggle with psychological safety, and we wonder why people are only bringing 55, 60% of their personal life view to work with them. And we go, we want difference, we want innovation, but people are scared. People are scared to bring them. So how do we still be professional, honest, polite, blah, 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 legal, but fail safely? How I know it's maybe a really difficult rubbish answer question, sorry, but
no, it's
how
not.
Does that look in practice in your organization or in your own personal life?
It's a complex question with an arguably simple and complex answer. Some of it is about consent, isn't it? A lot of it is about what becomes permissive in our relationship, and there are different relationships with different people. So I'm a big hugger. So with lots of people,
I hug all the time, but my missus tells me I need to do it less because I'm a big guy. And it scares some people.
Well, it depends if there's consent, isn't there? So I know full well that there'll be some people that you have a hug with or a kiss on the cheek, and other people that you sort of edge towards, is there a consent to do this in our relationship, and so on. So a lot of it's consent. Some of it is rule setting again. So I think, local managers, me, everybody saying, look, when you're sitting in these things, because there is nothing more tragic than watching somebody being dismissed. It really is. It's one of the things that has never left me. Personally, I don't like doing it. You've got to do it. But when you're sitting there looking at somebody who's a perfectly talented, sensible person, but they crossed the line, they got it wrong, and you think, was there a point at which you could have understood if somebody had been more clear about the rule setting? If they'd said, don't be a mug, don't do this, because we know full well that people aren't going to read the policies in depth very often. We write them, and you'd love people to read them, but let's be honest, people don't tend to read policies. So you've got to have managers who are then talking to people and saying, look, policy is really, really clear. Don't touch unless there's consent. Don't say sexist, stupid things. And my general thing is, I say to people, look, whatever your values are, if you want to scream at the telly in your front room, then that's what you want to do. And they may not be values that I agree with, but in your private place, that's what you can do it. But when you're in work and when you're wearing this uniform, in whatever view, social media, wherever it may well be, we wholly and 100% rely on the trust of the public. Wholly. We are going into their homes, into their lives, in sometimes tragic moments, and they need to believe that you are the best human being on the planet in that moment.
You are the physical manifestation of everything the emergency services represents. Everything. They may have never met a firefighter ever before. You are going to be the story they tell the world for the rest of their life.
Yes. My mate friend, I've just in just 2 seconds, one of my big mates, Jan, not long after 7/7, one of the tubes slightly derailed that she was on. And there's a whole long story into it because I was very poorly. And on 7/7, she was looking after me. So weirdly, she didn't go on the tube that day. And so we've never known whether or not she'd been involved in that nightmare. But just a few weeks later, it slightly derailed on the tube. And she isn't the person who would be one of those women in, oh, firefighters, aren't they gorgeous and all that kind of stuff. She's not that type. But I remember her saying to me that when the firefighter came along, the kind of, obviously the tube was stopped, comes through the tunnel, gets on it, and said, he seemed huge to me. And in that moment, just like, come on, love, you'll be all right. And said, I totally invested in this person. And because she's so not a kind of gushing person, there was something very real about that feeling. It stayed with me about her feeling of, I needed this guy in that moment to make me feel really secure. So the last thing they want to read in the newspapers is that firefighter A has been horrible to another firefighter, that they've undermined them, that they've been absolutely bloody evil with somebody, or they've nicked somebody's money, or all that stuff. And you think, and I know that's a big ask every single day of people who work for the service about whether you like it or not. I'm not asking you to live up to a hero thing, and the word hero is an interesting one anyway. But I do ask you to live up to those values, or don't do the job. Because if you've really lost that feel for it, if it's gone from you, then do the best thing for yourself and go somewhere else. But if you're still invested into this, then you've got to hold those values true. Otherwise, you will let everybody else down in this service, and more than that, across the sector. Because only needs one story in the papers about a firefighter doing something crap, and then everybody
people don't remember it was London or Kent or anywhere else. They just heard it was a firefighter, and they go, firefighters are racist. They're all racist, sexist. They all bully each other. That's what they do.
They're all macho. They're all awful. They're all this. They're all that. And you think, no, they're not. 99% of the people who work for every one of our services is an outstanding human being doing a fantastic job. They just are, and I mean everybody in the service.
Why do you think we're not as good at? We said about self-deprecation earlier. Why are we not good at screaming about ourselves, patting ourselves on the back, acknowledging each other? You're Chief Fire Officer, National Fire Chiefs Council. I think the fire service is one of the worst marketed things in the emergency services. Like, that was part of the thing. The podcast is the thing I wish existed when I joined. Like, people speaking to people around the fire and rescue service and go, oh, tell us your cool thing. Tell us what you did. Oh, wow. Tell us the incident you went to. Tell us you're buying this PPE. Tell us about that. Whatever. Do you know what I mean? A good news story. We get sent some horrific stuff, which you won't be surprised. Like, people send stuff to our email addresses like, oh, have you heard about this, Chief? Oh, have you heard about that thing happening? This person's a fraud. And I'm like, send it to the Daily Mail. Well, we don't just delete it. When you look at the headline, you're like, delete. Because I'm like, that's not what we're about. If you want to do that and you want to throw stones and point fingers,
and the headlines are on Tuesday after time anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, that's not what we're about. But we seem to, and Phil Garrigan actually said this. He was like, because I was talking to him about, we're struggling with finances and all this sort of stuff. How do we do more with less and all this kind of stuff? And I'll probably misquote him. Apologies to Phil, but he was like, we shouldn't be settling for less. Is like the fire and rescue service is a really, really valuable tool to society. And we're not going to get into a government conversation, but it's like, we shouldn't be shy about asking for more. We shouldn't be shy about doing more. We shouldn't be shy about valuing ourselves more. Why do we find it so hard to champion our good news stories? Why? Because pick any service in the UK, guarantee they did something amazing today. Guarantee it. Guarantee it. If you gave that to a new journalist and said, hey, here's 5 minutes, we'll tell you about the thing we did today. Gold dust.
I know.
Why doesn't that make it out? I want to take a minute to just tell you about something that I think you're going to be really interested in. Next September, firefighters from across the UK and Ireland will be travelling to Atlanta, Georgia for something truly special. It's the United for 9/11. It's the Memorial Stair Climb. Now, this isn't just any event. It's a once-in-a-generation tribute where 343 firefighters, one for every FDNY firefighter who gave their life on September 11th, will climb 110 floors in their honor. It's about more than just a physical challenge. It's about remembering sacrifice, pushing ourselves, and standing shoulder to shoulder across services and across nations. It's a chance to honor the legacy of 9/11, to pay tribute to our fallen firefighters and to test your mental and physical strength, and to raise an awareness around mental health and resilience in the fire service. Whether you take part in this climb or not, support from home, or simply help spread the word, you can be part of it. This is about unity, remembrance, and respect. So if you want to learn more, head over to www.memorialstairclimb.co.uk, or on Instagram, check out united_911climb. This is going to be something powerful. I hope you can make it. I hope you can support it. Now back to the show.
I think sadly, because the world doesn't care about good news anymore, does it?
No,
there's sadly that the news, and I know certainly experiences in the past with the media where, I mean, sometimes obviously you can get a good news thing in there, but on the whole, there's a focus and there's a publicity and there's a kind of, kind of snapshot on social media about the bad things, and everybody creates these conspiracy theories and God knows what. So saying to people, but actually we do this great work. But people are more interested in the kind of almost the news of the world version of, your culture's terrible, is it? And you think, no, actually it isn't. We've got a very small group of people who are, not
struggling.
Not
They're struggling in their interpretation of our values and our
struggling
morals,
about where they
are.
are.
A bit lost.
It is difficult, and sometimes, I'm reasonably forgiving of the fact that, and I'm very clear about this. It's not my right to tell somebody what they should feel and believe. But it is our right as a sector to say, I don't ask you to believe this, but I do ask you to behave in a certain way. And the behavior can be different from the feeling. I hope the feeling gradually catches up with the behavior. But the reality is, what we do is too important. We need to believe that in reality, that and the public, because I think there's one of the great myths of all time that everybody will ring 999. Well, actually, we know that loads of people don't ring for us. They're embarrassed.
We did the study thing around us where, like, there's a lot of Asian and Indian population around some of the cities that I live near. And we were like fourth. They were like, I'd ring my partner.
Yeah.
Then I'd ring my wider family. Then I would go to neighbors to ask for help. And if all of that failed, and the question was like, if you had a fire in the home, what would you do? They'd ring all these other people.
Yeah.
Before they would ring 999. And we're
and especially if you're a man, because we did some research some years ago. And a number of services got involved, put all the data together, and they did some great work about human behaviour in a fire. And one of the things that became very emergent, if you were sort of a guy between 30 and 50, you were pretty unlikely to be ringing the fire and rescue service, and the biggest thing that came up was embarrassment, because it's like, I don't want somebody else to ring them. Me. I bet you wouldn't ring the fire. I remember one of our old directors
live it down.
Said, I'd rather have my house burned down than call the fire and rescue service out, because he didn't want to be embarrassed. So there's this kind of, how do you get over all of this stuff? And the way you get over it is making sure that people, not necessarily the hero thing again, I think, because that can get misconstrued, but that sense of this complete professionalism, that it is a profession, it's treated like that, there's respect for it, and that people recognise firefighters as professionals. So when they're calling out somebody, it's not the Keystone Cops. They're going to be calling out people who are practiced professional people.
I'm biasly going to say, I would like to think, I've got young children, well, about 13, they would still approach a firefighter or a fire engine if they were in need. I think a lot of the younger generation wouldn't necessarily approach the police now, and that is so sad. That's so sad to think, because
very.
All first responders. My brother-in-law's a paramedic. One of my best friends is a police officer. Great people, but the police.
Yeah.
You know why they come in. You either love them or you hate them. If you're the one doing something wrong, you probably hate them. I've no idea why paramedics get attacked so much. The attacks on paramedics boggles my brain. But the fire service, you only ever, 99% of the time, they come in and everyone's glad to see them. Unless you got your bonfire out of control and you didn't want to tell anybody or whatever, then maybe you're not happy to see us. But most people are glad to see the fire and rescue service. But I don't think we market it well enough. I want to be respectful of time, but people might have been listening and they're like, oh, you didn't even talk about this. And I'm like, so I want to hard left turn, change gears for a second. Can we talk about procurement?
Yes.
So I want to talk a little bit around procurement. I want to talk about your role with the NFCC. There's a lot of conversation and challenges going around clothing, PPE, and all of that category. what are some of the big challenges that we're facing? Obviously, there's the financial challenges. There's climate change. I don't want to fill you all my own biases. There's the structural gear, the cost. There's the particulates and contamination and da 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 da. Big procurement framework, I think, is still going through at the moment.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Literally going through the tenders now.
What does that look like from a national perspective? How does the NFCC help? For people that don't know anything, let's zoom out for a second. How does the NFCC help people with that? Because services are big and small, different budgets. Some of them need to get involved and help from other people and all that sort of jazz. What are some of the big things that are the concerns? What are we aiming for in our new procurement sort of package? And talk to us around that for a second.
Okay. I mean, I was a national lead for a long time on commercial, and I stopped doing. I got to 60. I used to be people lead as well, but 10 years seemed like enough. But still, we're still the lead for PPE from Kent. And what you're trying to achieve, and I think one of the great myths about procurement is that, and I get this all the time, as you can imagine, somebody says, but I can go down to Wix and go and buy this, and you must have heard this, and it'd be a lot cheaper. Yeah. You think, not when you're buying 10,000 of them. So there's a whole thing.
And also, you've no idea where it comes from, and we can't prove that there wasn't slaves
what the supply chain is. And I'd love to believe that people actually care about the product I'm using, and I think most firefighters would. You think, do you really want to be putting something on your back that a child in a kind of slave labor situation created for you in another country? Or would you like to know that we had literally looked at the supply chain and we were really clear that this was genuinely an ethical buy in terms of stuff that you're getting on your back and you're using and so on? And I think most fighters,
I think this is one of the big risk areas, I think lack of knowledge and skill around legislation and procurement is where some services, if they're not careful, will make some massive 4 or 5 year
very
errors,
litigious world.
Very expensive, because no one wants to go into that role. Not no one, but it's a very rare. People go, do you want to be lady for procurement? No one wants to apply for that. I want the station manager job in charge of whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't want to be looking. And you're like, because very data driven, you've got to know the legislation.
Yes,
you've got to go fair amount of courses and all that development. And it is so important. If you get it wrong, it can cripple services.
Absolutely. Well, people get sued for millions nowadays because so you've got to know the legislation, as you say. I mean, to be fair, all the people in our team are Green Book because we brought them from procurement history. It's a profession. And that whole thing about what you're trying to do nationally is say, look, if we buy this together, firstly, you've got experts who are involved. You're trying to get an expert in every single service about PPE, for instance. So let's use the experts that we've got. And so we've got somebody called Brett Egan in our team who is the PPE expert. What he doesn't know about PPE.
Met Brett many times.
Yeah, absolutely superb guy. And then Sarah Walsh, who's kind of running all of that, Steve Topham, lots of people involved in that project doing a fantastic job. And in reality, what we're trying to do is say, if we accumulate together, firstly, the costs are, you're not always necessarily getting the cheapest cost, but you are getting the best you can get for your money. And sometimes you will genuinely save money because you're doing it together, but you'll have done all the procurement exercise once rather than 44 times, which is insanely costly. So you're literally doing the admin of it, and it's loads of admin you've got to do. And plus the fact you get into, there's a lot of complexities then around, so how do you make sure that it's laundered properly? Who's doing that? How are you making sure you're getting best value for money in the contract as it goes forward? Contract costs, it's all, suddenly you're thinking, God, it's all.
And
very
also
dull.
The risk profiles of each organisation. Yeah, like, someone, Wales as an example, big wildland fire risk. Do you know what I mean? Versus more centralized locations in the UK. So they might be really interested in, well, what are the options around, tactical gear versus... Here's a question for you. Random question, but I spoke to a company recently, had them on the podcast. And why do senior leadership teams get given firefighting PPE? Because I thought, because the organisation that I work for, as many, they're trying to do cost-saving exercises. And I put forward an argument where I was like, structural gear, it's, highly thermal resistant, blah, 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 but it's very heavy. I think I'm going to go out there and say I think it's the most expensive type of PPE we buy.
It's not cheap.
It's really expensive. I'm like, why is anybody beyond a station manager issued with fire kit? Why are they not issued with a more hybrid type kit that's a bit cheaper? Because they're not BA accredited for starters. They're never going to enter a structural fire. And I see chief fire officers walking around in full structural fire gear, and I think, why have you got that? I never thought about it until someone mentioned it recently. And I was like, if we said, so you've got what, 1,600, 1,700 people in your organization?
1,610.
How many operational? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Operational, it's 1,200.
Yikes. Okay, so 1,200 roughly operational staff. If we said 300 of them must be station manager and above, maybe 200, I don't know.
Yeah. But less actually, but yeah, something like that.
So that's and they've probably got 2 sets of structural gear each. And I'm like, I don't know why they've got it. Because I
suppose there's 2 things. One is, and you are right, and one of the things we're looking at is what do you do in terms of the kit for different people? We're literally having that conversation as we speak.
Fit for the role, right person, right gear.
But one of the things, I suppose, is the contaminants debate.
Yes.
Yeah, we're certainly looking at that. But I say some of it is about what's the best contaminant support. So if somebody's on the ground, and they may not be going into the building by any means, but you're still literally surrounded by particulates. What's the best way of supporting them? And that's going to be the best PPE you can get. So I think there's still some aspect about that kind of contaminant support, but it's definitely a debate. And obviously...
There is. I would push back and say most of the fire kit out there hasn't got a particulate blocker in it anyway.
No, it hasn't.
So it's like,
to get to the point where you could put a firefighter on the sun eventually because you make it so good, because then you make it...
And that's another one. When people go, oh, well, this has got thermal protection of X, and you're like, it's unnecessary. It's just gone way beyond the needed requirement.
You make it so heavy and intolerable to wear, and Brett's the expert on this, but you'll end up saying eventually, if you make this thing so thick, you literally will have people fainting because it's just drawing out the kind of moisture from the body and so on. So
and if it is that hot in there, what is the likelihood there's any remote savable life? What on earth am I doing in there?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I love going into really hot fires, but you get past a certain point and you go, well, I'm not doing savable life here, am I? Because I can bloody feel it, and this stuff goes up to X number of degrees.
Right.
Sorry, dragged you down a rabbit hole.
No, it's an interesting debate. It's one we need to have properly.
So what are the other challenges facing some of the procurement out there? When does this thing end? How do we stop massive companies being the only people that can apply for this stuff? Because some of the frameworks, they can be vaguely worded or cleverly worded, and I know that's a whole legal
It's a whole
nightmare.
Other challenge, that one. I mean, it is difficult because we're not a big market for most clothing companies.
We think we're massive,
Fires,
but we're small.
We're tiny compared to you look at the NHS.
Look at military or police or NHS.
That's it. We're really small.
Way bigger.
But on the whole, you end up having to have bigger companies who can end up doing you the niche part of it, as opposed to a small company can't survive on us in reality. And I think we're just not big enough to give them enough money, and the kind of their kind of costs in the end, and what the profit they're going to make. So you do end up with the kind of bigger players. And one of the things that's difficult in the market is making sure that you don't squeeze out those players either. So to a certain extent in procurement, you're always trying to keep some reasonable sense of how you keep markets afloat with 2 or 3 suppliers as well. So you've got that. And because you get to the point where most suppliers nowadays are global, so you're also then having global supply chain issues. The research behind it, one of the research issues that the sector suffers with to an extent, and sometimes we've got better, sometimes worse, is the kind of research base. And again, if we were talking about utopia here, we'd have a really big R&D team, and at different points.
ASA and Rowena Hill are doing some good work there. I'm not sure how much funding they do or don't get from the NFCC, but I love speaking to academics. They're really, really good, but I'm not sure there's enough funding given to them by the emergency. I don't think we've got enough money sometimes.
No,
but it is ASA, isn't it? I know they do a variety of things, but
yeah, they do. And they're looking at academic
research,
but you also want the R&D bit of it. And this is what Brett's been leading all around with the University of Bath and others around how do you actually test, how do you look at this stuff. And sometimes different individual services do this on their own and we don't share properly in terms of doing the R&D, and that's still an issue. But in a perfect world, as I say, if the money wasn't a problem, it feels like I spent my entire life having to talk about money. But if we get to the point where you could say, you'd most probably have a kind of R&D unit that is literally testing kit and equipment and looking at things around the world. You're looking at different approaches to things, looking at different tactics and how they work. You'd really do that. And then what the academics are hopefully doing for you is then saying, well, let's properly evaluate that. What really works? What do we know across the globe has ended up being a much better way of tackling this? And you're bringing sensible research together. But it always suffers with this, the lack of funding, and sometimes people, to an extent, also holding it onto those things themselves as well. They're not, we're not always as great as a sector for sharing.
Oh no, we're terrible at silo thinking. I don't know. Again, Phil and a few others. That's something they're trying to do with this like College of Fire. This keeps getting banded around, not necessarily it being a central location of a building or something like that, but more just a shared knowledge analogy, a shared resources analogy. Kent's got the best this, so we send people there from all over the UK for that. Merseyside or Manchester or wherever's got the best training, so we send them for that. Wales for the wildfires, wherever for leadership and procurement or whatever. Do you know what I mean? That might be a way to move forward.
We're better than we used to be. When I first started, we didn't seem to share a damn thing. We're better than we used to be, but it's a long way to go.
I want to I feel like I could speak to you for hours, but I want to be respectful of our time and try and maybe zoom out. And as we wrap up to close, what are the things you think we're not talking about? So if we did the pre-mortem red team and said, in 10 years' time, what things do you think we might look back on if we were to be horizon scanning now and saying, I'm not sure we're getting all the juice out the tube with technology, or I'm not sure we're giving the right consideration to climate change. I'm not sure we're giving enough attention to the changing socioeconomic demographic that we serve. What areas, I'm sure you don't sit up late at night thinking about it, but when you're sat back in a meeting or at the end of your lunchtime and you've got a moment to yourself and you go, you know what? And again, not necessarily about Kent, but you go, I don't know who's going to do it, but I don't think we're thinking enough about this. Is there anything that comes to mind with that?
There are so many things. I'm just thinking, I've actually perfected the art of eating a sandwich without taking my hands off the keyboard, which is bad. But anyway, I think there are things. I think 10 years from now, this is going to sound very challenging. I think the structure and nature of how the fire and rescue services themselves operate. So there are there are 44 English FRS. And whether or not that is sustainable, given the kind of budget cuts. So this is a conversation that's been had many times. I'm not unique in saying this.
We should be doing it.
There's a kind of, how do you do that with the least amount of damage? And I'm going to put myself out there here when I say this. I think we'd most probably have to create more of a central bit that says, well, we'll do policy once. We will do these things once. And it's gradually happening through the NFCC. And then we will, as sensitively as possible, think about, how do you create sustainable capacity? Because one of the problems we're going to see with and they are significant budget cuts heading our way. You can argue all day about the fairness of them, but we are where we are. And then the problem comes is that we all die by 1,000 cuts, literally.
Yeah.
And it's the worst way to die, as we know. So you get to the point where you lose your capacity to then really manage that change. And you're right, as much as possible. And again, you're talking utopia here. There are systems, we looked at something the other day, and I won't name it, but we looked at an IT system that manages learning competence in this really brilliant way. It comes from the airline industry, funny enough. It was fantastic.
Oh, they're so good.
Well, with the black box thinking stuff, again. I got in touch with the Civil Aviation Authority and said, can we come and learn?
We had Martin Bromley, who's at the beginning of black box thinking. We had him on the podcast.
Oh, really?
Talking about his wife, Elaine Bromley. Because he goes around teaching human factors, behavioural stuff, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, oh my God, I could have listened to that guy for hours. They're so good at it, But
and some of that stuff that we'd say, how do you get that innovation in? How do you get the IT to come in? How do you make sure, and we're just mapping digital skills now, what digital skills do everybody need to have to make sure they feel they're not frightened by that technology that's coming? So people use Copilot and Gemini and AI and all those sorts of things. I mean, we've got a robot we're testing, all that stuff, and it's not to replace a firefighter, but it is to say, but there are situations where it's easier to put the robot in than it is to have something potentially
Lancashire had a cool one.
Challenge.
Yeah.
So all of that, and our response director, Matt Deadman, doing fantastic. We're kind of pushing that agenda and saying, well, let's make sure that we're not putting firefighters in places where they really shouldn't be. So how do you kind of get that professionalism working? But overall, I think if we're robbed of that managerial leadership innovation capacity because we're not bringing back together the energy of either merging services or merging talent into a central place that helps us all, and however you do it, and it's not for you to decide the shape of it. But
I just think it'd be
somehow
great for development as well. Like if you could say, you could more easily say, I'm going to send someone on a 12-month secondment to the neighbouring service because there's not a whatever here. There's not a watch manager. There's not a group manager role here. But this person is so ready and they are dead person's shoes. No one's going to leave in the next. We've just done the promotion round. I want to send them for that. And we're going to give you them for 12 months and you give us somebody else. But we make it so damn hard to do that now.
Yes, we do.
So damn
we really
hard.
do. I've had this conversation.
And it's only 40 minutes over there.
I know.
You know what I mean? It's only another hour's drive. The person will do it. They might even they might swap houses. They might, just set themselves up over there. But I'm like, I wonder if in like 3 or 4 years, we're actually having member of Scotland's SLT on soon, because they did it. I mean, I'm not saying they did it successfully or whatever, but they've turned 8 services into one. They had to do it, and it was horrible and uncomfortable and culturally challenging. But they joke, I was speaking to one of them the other day, I won't say who, but they were like, everyone says, London Fire Brigade's biggest one in the UK. We've got about 1,500 more staff than they have. They've got like 7,500 staff or something like that. And you try and travel from one end of their service to the other, you're going to have to take 2 boats and a 6-hour car drive.
Absolutely.
Like cultural change.
And to be fair, they're still young in their change in reality. And I'm sure there's, of course, there's issues when you're bringing 8 together and they're still going on. And that kind of geography is going to be really different. But I don't think we'll be able to escape for much longer having to do... Because otherwise you get into that benign neglect that you're just being neglected as a sector, and it's very easy then to carry on sitting where we are.
And if you don't work with each other, what they'll do is they'll take you over and they'll go, right, you're police and crime commissioner, we're going to put in police and fire, you're all in together, and now we've got somebody else. And you go, oh, you're never getting back that. You're never going to get that back. So work together or I'm going to take your toys off you, and then someone else is in charge of you now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You never get it back.
No, and I think to be fair, 10 years from now, if we look back, and it's tough. I mean, I'd be the first person to say it would be very tough to kind of regionalise however you did it. The truth is that what I fear the most is that we will lose that capacity to innovate. And you're right, when you look at society, you look at what's happening. I'm the chair of trustees for a hospice, and they just do tremendous work. In fact, they just won Charity of the Year, which is amazing. But
nice.
But when they're looking at their challenges, you've got an aging population. That aging population is more ill. That people are living longer with kind of different morbidities. You're looking at kind of fracturing of society, political fracturing. There feels like there's more hate and violence and Lord knows what going on. And the fire's right in the middle of how do you, at one end, deal with somebody who is clearly suicidal, mental health issues, safeguarding issues, which we do really well, and safeguarding is such a big issue nowadays. And at the other end, you're now tackling, kind of batteries, all that kind of emergent technology, and there'll be other emergent technologies. And then how do you support people who are, in terms of socioeconomics, not buying the best kit? They're not interpreting messages that we're getting out there. They've got 5,000 other messages from social media about, go and buy this ridiculous piece of makeup. They're not going to go into a YouTube clip from Fire saying, don't put your hair straighteners on the bed. So there's how do you message into that generation who are bombarded with messages about how they keep themselves safe. And I think, sadly, that is going to require a real capacity from all of us to say, how do you keep emerging as a sector at the same time as all the time we're facing all these cuts? It's very easy to become very insular, look into your service and try and support everybody through difficult times. And the thought of redundancies is horrible. So you're trying to do the least amount of damage as you can to human beings as you get through very difficult change. So it's, I fear that we most probably need, and whether we're able to have the capacity to do it, to have a bigger conversation one of these days about what we're able to do.
We've got to
carry on as we are.
We've got to. It both petrifies and fascinates me, but in the same way as when anyone's going through a crisis, whenever I've spoken to people in like suicide as an example, don't be afraid to just talk about the reality of what it is. You know, in that very, very weird example, but like I say to people, like, have you made a plan? Have you made a plan to kill yourself? Do you know what I mean? Because
what's your safety plan?
there's nothing wrong we're saying that because they're probably already thinking it. And if to flip that conversation back and get away from that very sticky topic, let's talk about this. Is the reality. We're facing tremendous financial challenges, and you're going to run out of runway eventually. And then you're going to have to go, right, close the fire station, right, get rid of 15 Green Book staff. We're just going to replace them with AI or whatever. Let's have that conversation early, really early, because this stuff's not going to be quick to change. It's not going to be quick to change.
No, it would take years.
I've absolutely loved that. I could literally speak to you for hours. I'd love to have you back on in like 4 months, 6 months, whatever it may be.
I'd love to do that. It'd be really nice to talk to you. I'd love you to coach me. Such a great job with this. I know people are loving this podcast.
It's weird. I try not to think about it too much. We had to put a package together recently because someone asked about the reach of the podcast and stuff like that. And I try not to think about the numbers too much because I get too stuck in my head. and I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, lots of people are listening to this. And it's just, yeah. No, I just love speaking to interested people. And you've been really kind holding my hand as I fumble my way through these, through the things I want to talk to you about today.
You're an expert. Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Send my love to all of the team. And I really look forward to speaking with you again.
I will do.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Hope you took a lot away from that episode. We started the Firefighters podcast to develop, inspire, connect, motivate, represent, and most importantly, celebrate the world of incredible emergency services operators and the wider sector through this series of wide-ranging conversations. We really love creating this podcast and bringing it to so many people. Did you know you can also find these on YouTube? We do a lot of video podcasts now. You can head over to our YouTube page and follow, subscribe there. And as a final ask from us, whatever platform you're on, please rate the podcast. It really helps us as a key performance indicator to reach more and more people. I've been your host, Pete Wakefield. This has been the Firefighters Podcast. And wherever you are in the world, please stay safe, be happy, live with intention, and where possible, please remember and support your firefighters and first responders. I'll see you next time.